For one of these, uh, got it. For one of these, I should stream it to Twitch to make sure to see how both works. You know what I mean?
No.
The dual stream, I could be streaming on my Twitch right now too.
I thought Twitch doesn't like YouTube or doesn't
Oh
want you to
no, of
do
course
that.
they don't want you to, but
But we're not, who cares?
we just hide those.
So you mean like have the ability like pushing the zoom to both?
Mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah, and from what I understand, so Zoom and or YouTube and Twitch are the two like buttons that are there, but it says you can do, although now that I'm clicking it, I don't have the option to do to anything else. I wonder if I do Twitch first, if then I don't know.
Yeah, that would be my thought too, is you have to do them and then are
Well, I guess
we
I guess we'll find out. Yeah, we're live. I can
are
see
we?
myself going.
I cannot. YouTube
Um,
takes a hot minute
yeah, let me see.
to
Let me
say that
refresh
we're
this.
it says that we're live, but um it's not populating yet.
All right, well, you can't see it. I'm gonna eat soup. Hmm. This week,
There we
I think
are.
oh, that was rubber top in there. This
That's
week,
okay.
the
They
papers
see
were very interesting.
all the talking ahead of time anyways.
True. I thought that the papers this week were really interesting.
They
Um,
were very interesting.
yeah, the first one I was like, oh my gosh, how many pages is the
That's
first
a lot.
one?
It's a long, yeah, it's long.
The
I mean,
Virginia
I
guns, but it was
definitely
so
so
good.
far I think this set of groupings I found the most new information
Oh, okay.
in a set of papers. For sure. They were very
Mm,
nice. Although, man, Virginia Gunn, the girl can write, man.
hmm
I was like, this doesn't seem like the other two. The other two must be short because like, man, this one's long.
Well, Virginia Gunn was you Uncovering's editor for a while, wasn't she?
I don't know.
I think so. Yeah.
I do not know.
And I meant to go in and excuse me, to check because there is that index, and I can't remember where I got it from, but there is an Uncoverings index.
Hmm.
I think that goes up to I don't I got it long enough ago that I don't think, hey Robin, I don't think that it would include like the at least the last two Uncoverings, although I could be wrong. But it definitely has like what all the articles are, or the paper titles, the um people who wrote
Subjects
them,
and
and yeah, and then what year they were in.
mhm.
Um so I thought I like could do that and let everybody know, which they're in. But I thought it was interesting. I think you were on the email where Barb clarified for us that in those early days there were no pictures.
Mhm.
Like now, even now, there's not a whole lot of pictures, but in the early days there were no pictures. So that was probably part of Laurel Horton's editor job and other people that contributed to this, probably the paper writers themselves as well, to get pictures. So I think that's probably why when we're like, there's nothing about this particular picture in this paper, it's because they were just added in later as, so that this wasn't just a big book of like text.
You know, and I have to say I appreciate adding
Hmm.
visual stimulation. For me,
Yeah.
the learner, I'm a a dual. I'm not, I like visual stimulation as well as word. And
Yeah, for sure.
especially this set of papers, I found the photos, the accompanying photos to be the most enlightening
Mm-hmm.
because I don't know, I felt like maybe they had the most to do with the actual article
True.
or what the subject matter is.
Hmm.
Especially like the gunboat quilts. I liked the
I, you know,
what?
I was just gonna say, yeah, Robin says she vaguely remembers seeing something like that. Are you talking about the index, Robin?
Oh, I'm
Um,
sure she is.
yeah, so the gunboat, I don't want to jump into it, but the gunboat calls, I was like, I've never heard of this.
Really?
And the gunboats were like, one of them's called the Fredericksburg and one of them was called the Richmond. And I'm like, well, I lived in both of those cities, grew up in both of those cities. And it's like, how I thought I knew everything about the Civil War, just having lived there and like it gets
I
drilled into you.
I
And I just didn't know
if I
about that.
recall, hi Tish, if I recall,
Hey, Tish.
Mary did a stream one night where they were mentioned, just
Hmm,
gunboat quilts in general. Um,
I
but
could have
maybe
missed
you
it.
weren't around at that point, or maybe
Yeah, that might
I
have
don't,
been.
it might have been early
Yeah.
on, but I do remember
Mhm.
her it coming up at some point for
Yeah.
some weird reason. It could have just been because it's Tuesday. I don't know.
Well,
As,
I mean, the
as
fact that there are
people are,
quilts for
oh,
everything, right?
I mean, one thing, especially about reading Virginia Gunn's article, um, yeah, see, Robin remembers too. Robin is our quilt nerd index.
Right?
Because she remembers every, I know, I mean, I remember there was the creation of kind of an index at one point of what was happening on each show. Hi, Janet. Um, I will say, like, reading Virginia Gunn's article, it makes me sad that not enough recognition happens for the fact that, like, all of humanity stands on women's shoulders.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. So yeah, let's get into it.
well, hold
I have
on.
so
Before we get
much to
into it,
say.
give me one sec. Give me
Okay.
one sec before we get into it, because I just want to, we have 3 more weeks of this book.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I want to
Okay.
remind people that we do have the next one picked out here. Um, and it's Dawn Cook Ronnigen, Antique American Needlework Tools. This will be some lighter reading after some of this, some of our current book is on the heavier side. It's academic writing. And we wanted something fun and just a little bit different. It sounds like at some point we might be reading about bed rugs. So and there is discussion that we might just have Dawn on an episode to talk with us about her book here. I have the link. She did self-publish this book. She does still sell it herself. Your copies are autographed. Um, and we definitely encourage you to buy directly from her, since that is a big undertaking, and we always want to make sure to support people we can support. Come on.
Yeah. And did we say that maybe we could tap Dawn for a conversation, or is she not
I
in yet?
Um, no, I just said that. Were you eating soup?
Yeah, well, you were talking about the book.
I said
So,
potentially we can have her on. Why doesn't it
okay.
like, okay, for some reason the chat like does not want to let me put this in.
Dee Marie remembers the conversation on gunboat quilts. I must have just not been at that show because gunboat quilts, I was like, what?
It looks like the thing is too long. Let me just get to her. Let me just put on her Etsy site instead. She's
Oh,
got
yeah,
other
look,
really
there you go.
great stuff on there too. That she does some patterns. She's got another book that's really great. There we go. There's her Etsy site. Please buy her book directly from her because it's, we have to support people so they keep doing great things. So that will be our next book. We're on this book for 3 more weeks. Um, I wonder if the chat was like frozen for a sec because someone else there couldn't get in. So
Yeah, Dee Marie
next
said the same
week,
thing, but like I don't even see your link now. It's not.
I do remember Robin saying that there's a delay on the chat.
Yeah.
Um, next week, which is the 19th, our assignment for that week will be section 4, which is textiles and tools. And the little blurb for that is among the important influences of the ways women made quilts were the availability and cost of fabric and major shifts in textile technology. These chapters examine the quilts that were influenced by these changes. They really did a great job of grouping important things that took place, in the history timeline.
Hmm. And
That's
I
for
love the
sure.
fact that, I mean, I guess in the first 10 years, there was enough, um, papers written that kind of fit into these, I mean, I can think of organizations that probably have papers written over decades that probably don't fit neatly into these nice
Mm-hmm.
categories. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, this book was probably like 10 years, this book wrote itself, literally.
All
But
right.
yeah, I'm excited about this next one because we're getting into sewing machines and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So very cool. Next
Well,
week will
that
be
in the
fun.
next chunk has your BFF, the Mary Carey Waldvogel herself.
Yes, 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 yes. Mary Kay's paper, which I have not read. So I've read a lot of Mary Kay stuff, but I have not read this one yet. So
Oh, well, that's exciting too. You get to discover
mhm,
your favoriteest person, like in this moment. Who knows? Maybe
mhm.
we could get her to pop by.
Yeah,
All
she's
right, let's
always
get
game for an
going.
adventure. All right.
So we're starting here with Quilts for the Union Soldiers in the Civil War by Virginia Gunn.
So first, you're absolutely right. Like, holy cow. Like, talk about unsung heroes. Like, our government, and of course, we're talking the US government, was so unprepared, declare war against your citizens and then, like, send your boys to war. Good luck, guys. And like all the women are like, well, can we like clothe and give bedding to our boys? Like, what the heck? And I mean, I of course grew up in a part of the country that's very Civil War heavy because like so much of the Civil War happened there. So we heard a lot growing up. Civil War sites for school field trips, all that stuff. And I think probably what I remember most about all that education in grade school was the devastation of our country and the number of casualties. I mean, it's just like bloodiest battles ever kind of stuff. Like that's what sticks with me. And I mean, the whole Civil War conversation is, I mean, there's travesty all over it. And I mean, it was a terrible time for our country. Um, but again, we looking in here and you think about like, I mean, we haven't gotten to restoration yet, which is post-Civil War, the women that were involved in that. But I mean, I knew there were these relief and aid societies. I just like in reading this article, I was like, what? I mean, these women in some cases were like single-handedly in their communities, clothing and, bedding, blankets, all this stuff for the regiments themselves, not to mention all of the sick and injured. I'm just like, Lincoln, what did our government actually give them? you know,
Well, that and the fact that
inferior blankets.
they organized so fast and
Yes,
so
yes.
large. There was some 20,000 aid societies.
And like
Um,
as I was reading through here, I was like, oh, okay, well then what year is this? And I'm like, oh, still 1863. Oh,
you're
they
like,
did all
well, an
this.
awful
When was
lot's
that?
happened in 3
Oh,
months.
like a month later,
Yeah.
1863. Oh my gosh, look at that. Still 1863.
Or
And
like when the contributions that women made through the US Sanitary Commission totaled 25
I
million.
know. Yeah, like today, any group of organizations doing that would be like, amazing. And now we're talking like over 150 years later.
Well, and
And
today
that's
our
an amazing amount of
organizations are
money.
they're collecting money digitally. These people are not collecting money digitally.
Yes, yes, yes.
And even like what
Yeah.
God, 25,000 then would be what would that be now? 25 million.
As I was reading this away from my computer and here's
Robin, what would 25 million dollars be today? Between now 1863.
I mean a lot. It's got to be a lot of money.
Yeah, I'm thinking like I'm like, what is it, like $100 billion or something jazz?
Yeah. So my husband gets mad at me when I say things like this, but I'm like, time and time again, there are stories like this that kind of prove me right. But I'm always like, you know what? You want something done in an organized, efficient, and quick way, get the women to do it. You know what? You want it done right? Like, just let us do it. Because, and I'm not to discount the fact that there are certainly, I'm sure men involved in all of this, but it's kind of like, men start wars when men make messes of things and women come along and like you know um, I mean I hate to be that way. I really my husband gets so mad at me when I say stuff like that, but this is again example of story after story after story that happened over like a 4-year period of like the government going like, oh, yeah, here's the bad blankets, soldiers, and the women all going like, what? Get that out of here. Let me get a million coats by tonight.
Well,
You
never
know,
mind,
that's like,
never mind bad blankets, just no blankets. But it's
well,
funny,
right, right.
like I could, your husband's getting mad at you saying stuff like that, but the fact of the matter is though is that aside from this happening, right? Oh my God. So Robin said it's like $1 trillion.
Oh,
Yeah. So like
man.
to amass that kind of wealth that quickly, not digitally, like you physically have to
Yeah.
amass it,
Well, and this
is
is, and actually, I
bananas.
have a question for anybody who knows this as well as our lurkers. Where is it? Okay. So what is the Dime Society? They mention this. It's in that report of, the Girls Soldiers Aid Society. Like, why do we
Hmm.
have to put that in quotes? Like, I'm assuming this is a thing like, here's a dime, but I mean, what was what was specific about this Dime Society versus like their other fundraising efforts? Like, what was it? Um,
I did not look into
yeah,
it.
I didn't see it. Like she mentions it in the text, and then it's in this breakdown of
Was it in her
breakdown
notes
of
at
the
all?
money. Oh, you know what? I didn't there.
Notes and references.
Um she's got so many
No,
bibliography.
she just basically put where that came from.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm sure it's kind of one of those, like, I mean, think of any kind of fundraiser that we would do today. Like, here's this thing that we do, and then, oh, it costs a dime for that. And but it seemed like it raised like a not
21 bucks.
yeah, I mean, not that's like more than 3 times as much as memberships. So um maybe I should think about it on my Twitch. So for folks that don't want to subscribe, well, we have that Dime Society.
Well, it's funny is like stand on the fairgrounds, $62. $62 is a lot of money when you
Yeah.
consider that people are buying things with change, with nickels and dimes and like cost
Right.
wise.
Well, and I
So
mean,
to
that was
amass
like that was
$62,
normal currency then. I mean, today we don't think twice about like pocket change is like whatever.
because
But
you
I
can't
mean,
buy anything with it.
yes, back then you could. So pennies and nickels and dimes and quarters were, I mean,
Their
that was their
everyday money.
funds.
Their everyday money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Just like tens
Mhm.
and twenties, I guess, or my everyday money now, which I never
Actually,
have
now
enough
our
of.
everyday money has to be like 50s and hundreds to afford things. Like,
True. This is true. Um, but yeah, I think like just overall, and there was a couple things that I marked in here, but overall, like this story, or I mean, there are multiple stories. I just was like, I mean, I vaguely knew these things, you know?
but
Um,
this puts like
yes, like
tangible
the
numbers.
numbers, the actual numbers. Yeah. I mean, this
Um,
is like, I think this was an incredible research feat because, to get all of these records and
yeah, like
to
on
get those
page
numbers.
84, I made a comment about just the sheer volume of quilts. So like
Hmm.
during the year 1863, people contributed 5,459 quilts to the Hartford, Connecticut Association, and then a sentence down, 1,200 went to 1,200, another 1,200 quilts to the armies of Virginia. Like
Hmm.
we can't even fathom that amount of quilts now. When you think about like
Right.
museums, so
Hmm.
like IQM has something, what, 6,000 quilts, I believe, in their
Something,
collection,
yeah. I mean, it's
something
in the
like that.
thousands, but yeah.
But like that's like the amount that just Hartford, Connecticut has. Like,
Right.
and the other, I mean, there is a part of me too, I'm not gonna lie, there is a part of me that is sad that all of this was lost
I was about
because
to say, because they're talking about like, oh, these Revolutionary War quilts were pulled out, and we're like, oh,
yeah.
they got all filthy and bloody and gross and
Well,
probably
or
burned in battle, but yeah.
Janet just mentioned, remember that 1863 is 3 years into the war.
Hmm. Yeah, well, I think they started. I mean, some of this was started in 1861.
Hmm.
Yeah, I
Robin
mean,
says she
this would
thinks Robin says she wonders if the Dime Society was similar to a community donation jar because she's not finding anything about an actual Dime Society. Hmm.
interesting. I'll
Interesting.
have to get some deeper look into that. But yeah, I mean, I know there was like a big chunk of stuff here in 1863, but yeah, I mean, the story starts in 1861.
Hmm.
And the So I mean, even in those first, like, by nightfall, so this is within, so they found out on day one there was a problem, so they started going around. By day two, by nightfall of day two, they had gotten 729 blankets.
From
Could
just going
you
door from going door
find
to door.
729 blankets in a 36-hour period today? You would have this door slammed in your face, and people go like, "Who the hell are you?" But I mean, could I go to every Goodwill store? And I mean, certainly you could go to places like Walmart and Target and probably round up 700 blankets. But could I go to every Goodwill or some place that had, charity type of bedding and get 700 items like within 36 hours? No. I mean, it would be hard. It would be so hard. So this just is so amazing. Oh, and what the women turned out 1,000 shirts in 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, now granted, they're probably not like fancy button downs or anything, but
And on like page 85, people acknowledge that many heirloom quality quilts had to be donated to the cause. That's the
yeah,
part that
that's
I was
where,
just like,
yeah, the
I mean, I get
revolutionary,
it, but
yeah.
like,
Yeah, you're like, oh, could you maybe just kept that one hidden and given them just like the everyday one off your kid's bed? Um, but so a couple things that I learned. So lint, I'd always heard of lint as being like a, just a textile byproduct kind of thing that got used for stuff. But I thought it was interesting how she specifically said like scraped linen produce lint. And that makes a lot of sense because linen is it wicks, and like the cellular structure of linen fibers like disperses liquids. So it makes sense that anything like that might be like wound care or whatever they might use that for makes sense that it was like a useful fiber for that. So that was interesting. And then the other thing, oh, I think the other thing is in the next paper. Um, yeah, where's the other thing?
Fish said, I wonder how many quilts were used to bury soldiers.
Oh, that's a good question too.
I don't
Yeah.
know that there's any way to ever find any of that information out. The only thing that we know is that
Mhm.
like that happened. Um,
For sure. Well, and I mean, bodies shipped home. I mean, that was another aspect of the Civil War. Like, that's where embalming comes from, is because, yeah, some of these dead bodies were states and states away from their home. And I mean, you would imagine that those bodies were probably wrapped in something just for the dignity of the dead.
mhm,
Yeah. So, I mean, those could
mhm,
be blankets, quilts, whatever. And I liked the stories with the people that are like, can I keep my quilt?
mhm.
Or the guy that the little kids made the quilt, like, oh,
Yes,
so
that
cute.
was I found that like it's well, that wasn't news that like you have a group of people they're all making squares, but to have them all sign it and then like request a letter back, I was just like, "Ugh, how
That's really touching.
wholesome." Like how
I
wholesome
know, I know.
for everybody's kind of mental health, you know? Like
Hmm. Well, and I mean, it's that. So to kind of take this back, sort of like the 10,000 foot view, as I started reading this, I was like, and I said the thing I said about like, let the women get it done. But just think about like within the past, well, pandemic alone, but within, the past 5 years, think of all the things that have happened in our world and where people who sew, quilt, make jumped into action. So like again, set the pandemic aside for a minute, but like wildfires in Australia, there was not only
mhm.
people that were being served, but also animals.
There
They
was
were
a whole
starting, I
big
guess,
thing in the sugar glider community where people were making sugar gliders in captivity, sleep in pouches.
the
And people were
pouches.
making
Yeah.
sugar glider pouches to send over.
Yeah. Well, and I think there was for like all of the animals, like the wallabies and the koalas, there was all kinds of, well, and of course people love cute animals. So, but again, like I read where they were having to like turn stuff away because so many people were trying to help.
Hmm.
And I mean, here in the US, any kind of natural disaster, the stuff that happened in Hawaii, like those fires, California, people are always like ready, like just to jump in, and especially people that make things. And then like Ukraine, like lots of quilters for Ukraine, and now we're seeing stuff for Gaza. So it's like people are always want to jump in and they feel helpless. And I think for people that make things, if you can make something that you know will be useful in a time of crisis or in a time of need, that's what we do. And it just was so touching to me to think that we still do this today. And it's not, there's nobody that like necessarily having to like rally the troops. It's like people just do it. They jump in, they find the person who's like, hey, I'm leading for my area or my region, send me stuff. I'll make sure it gets to the right people. Like, I mean, it's just amazing to me as human beings, we still do this.
When Robin said she was part of the group that made quilts for the wildfires in California several years ago. And
Hmm.
Janet said it's more personal to make something than to send
Yeah.
money. Absolutely. You feel
Well,
like you have a
exactly.
hand
Yeah.
in where the help is actually
Hmm.
going to go, as opposed to someone else
Right.
deciding where it's going to go. Like money.
Exactly. And not everybody has money to send places,
Mhm.
but quilters have scraps, you know,
Mhm.
like
Quilters have
we are
stash.
rich. Yeah, we are rich with stash.
Yeah, that's for sure. Um, you said at one point you were almost going to talk about the next article. Do you want to go into that?
Sure. Um,
Alabama gunboat quilts.
like gunboats. Um, so where is this? Okay. So this is like really far jumping ahead. And it's just something that like as I was skimming it before I read it and went back and then read it in detail, I was like, what? So this is on page 102 in the center column at the bottom. It talks about staining around the applique on one of the quotes, and it said maybe the result of a paste used to stiffen the applied work. The paste consisted of either carpenter's glue and flour, ugh, or shoemaker's paste of rye flour. So that was interesting to me that they were using a stiffener for these applique pieces. Um, and what it was made out of. I mean, I guess I see flour being used as like a starch, because I mean that's starch. But carpenter's glue that doesn't sound like very archival.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that just got me to thinking, like, what other kind of stuff do you think that they used, like in their sewing habits?
It makes me wonder, like, is that how, like, the same way that we use kind of glue on the edge, for applique now before we stitch it down?
Yeah, and I mean that does make sense. But I'm just wondering, like, what were people using things on the fly? Because, I mean, you can't back then you just can't run out to the local quilt store or, dial in the fatquartershop.com or amazon.com. Like, so I'm sure people were using things that they had at home, right? Or that they had access to within their whatever, their geographic area. So I just thought that was like I never heard of putting carpenter's glue on a quilt. That's all I'm
No,
saying.
I know, I've never heard of that either. I'm sure one of our friends has, because
um
they hear of everything. Oh,
Yeah, for sure. White glue, for sure. I mean, white glue washes out. Like white glue, like PVA. And maybe that's what, well, no, PVA it's a plastic. So that carpenter's glue of the 1800s would not be, or whatever this, yeah, 1800s would not have included any plastic. So, 'cause, yeah, but white glue today is easily washable because that's what you give
it's what
kids.
kids harden and pick off their hands in class. Um,
How many bottles of Elmer's did I decimate in my childhood? Um,
what I found the most interesting about this is she's talking about six quilts, and the fact that she's talking about like quilts that survive,
mhm.
and like we know where they are.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. And these, I'm not a huge fan of chintz, but these are really stunning pieces of work.
Come on, chintz is your favorite.
Well, I like this one simply
Hmm.
because it's not your standard chintz, but
Hmm.
the other ones are more like the standard chintz. So I guess this one, the one that I guess we only have a black and white. Did it actually say what colors it was? I don't know, maybe it says it in the text and I missed it, but yeah, like this
I
one.
don't
I
know that
just
I did.
I imagine this one is like, I don't know, it's like indigo blue or green or something. I'm totally wrong, I'm sure, but I just picture it being like colorful and not
Oh, I'm sure it is.
yeah.
I mean, because like the chintz alone, the cut work. I
Hmm.
mean, it looks like
Well, I
it.
mean, just in comparison to these, right? Like
Well, I
the
was gonna say the
white
chintz print
background.
looks very similar to the first one.
Hmm.
So I wonder if it's even the same print.
Yeah.
And in that one, they even did like cutout work to make this like streak of lightning kind of border. Um,
Hmm.
that is very cool.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um,
You're welcome, Janet. Um,
so yeah, I have to go back to the fact that like as I'm reading through this, everything that like all of the places in that she mentions in here, like half of them I have family from.
oh yeah.
Um, I grew up in, I went to school. I one thing I find really interesting is like just literally in the first page where she says, March 17th, 1862. The Richmond Daily Dispatch appealed for funds, citing inspiration from the women of South Carolina, Georgia. The women of Williamsburg responded by forming a society. So Richmond and Williamsburg, like today, I mean, it's like an hour trip. But back then, I mean, not to say that they were like so separated, but Richmond and Williamsburg were like very different areas. And of course, the James River is the connection point, and I'm sure during the Civil War, their proximity mattered. They were close enough. But it just surprised me that you had women in Williamsburg kind of responding to this thing that was in the Richmond Time or the Richmond Daily Dispatch. The
Mm-hmm.
Times Dispatch is the paper now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I thought that was interesting, just a geographic thing. And it's like maybe I'm just overthinking the geography split back then versus now. But I thought that was interesting. And then
Mm-hmm.
the ladies' gunboats. Like, way to make a lady feel special for funding a gunboat.
I like how they were like the petty, what is it, petticoat gunboat
The
or
petticoat
the
boats. Yeah, the
yeah,
petticoat
like
gunboats.
I was be like, now if you were gonna use petticoats for the sails, that might make sense if it was a
Yeah.
sailboat.
It's, to me, it's like, it's a little bit of pandering, right? It's kind of like, maybe if you let the lady drive the gunboat, you'd really be doing a good thing. But, um, oh, hide glue. Okay. Yes, hide glue is water soluble. You were absolutely right, Tish. Okay. Hide glue is also very gross, but but it is an archival substance, for like bookbinding and stuff, hide glue.
I feel like every now and then we need that like 80s to 90s, like star across the screen. This is like the more you know.
I'm gonna make that quilt next year for QuiltCon.
I was surprised when we get into this part of like raffling off these gunboat quilts on
Hmm.
page 98. She's mentioning one of the quilts, excuse me, in Alabama on April 19th, 1862. $108 was raised from the raffle of a fine silk quilt. It was made by a patriotic young woman of Demopolis, Miss C. $108 back then.
Yeah. Hmm.
Robin, what's $108 in 1862? Like, that's a
We
lot.
need to have our converter up so that
That's
Robin
a
doesn't have to do
lot
this
of
work.
money.
It really is. And of course now I'm going like which one of these did I read it in? Um, but yeah, I think it wasn't. Is it in this one? Yeah, the prices, what they've raised. It's like, wow, you know. Was it in here where they talked about like the idea of raffling quilts was a little touchy because of it was considered gambling. I mean, it's still even today, raffles are.
I don't, maybe if they said that I glazed over it.
Yeah, I know
Um,
I saw it in here.
Because you have one of those other quilts that was raffled off like 3 different times because they kept, let's see, like it was sold 4 times. The one that now lives in the museum, that's the first White House of the Confederacy, sold 4 times, twice in Tuscaloosa for 115 and 500, and then in Summerfield for 250, and in Selma, price unknown. So people just kept giving it back, which is such an odd concept to me because I'm just like, why didn't you just give them that money then? Like, so
Well, but you know that that's the
Robin
thing.
said the 108 would be
$1,000.
3,586. Wow,
And
we can't even get the average person that doesn't quilt to understand the amount of money that goes into a quilt today, and like to realize that value on just for time and materials. And these people in this period are raising that kind of money on it.
Yep. Yep. Well, and on the same page, I think you were talking about a little bit the third column, but right there in the middle where it's talking about money being contributed. Money is contributed in small donations ranging from $1 to $303.95. Kind of round that up to 304 by women, children, and enslaved people.
Yes, I thought that was interesting.
People who have no right to vote, don't have like, I just, that blows me away. And then all of the objects given to the cause I thought were really fascinating. You know, these are the things that people would have that have a value to them.
Yep.
And oh, so here, this is the one thing I want. So concerning the sewing machine, lady wrote, I have no money nor valuables, my only treasures being my children, and I cannot offer them to my country, for they are daughters. Oh, I have a sewing machine though, which I offer to be disposed of for the benefit of the fund. And I mean, you know, at this time period, like sewing machines were not brand new, but newer and of major value, right? Um, and I mean, I just go yesterday, like I think you tuned into my stream for a little bit yesterday, but I showed that video, the embroiderers, the women, the Palestinian women, and the needlework that they do, and sort of the, you know, refugee diaspora throughout the Middle East. There's a lot of reading these first few papers. I got the feeling of what those women were saying, of just like, I don't have, like, I can't take up arms for my country. I can't, you know, do this or that, but I have my needle and thread. I can sew. I can, you know, sew as a matter of protest, or just sew to make money because our country's war torn, or make things for my family. Like that, I get all of that in here. And it's like, you know, again, timeless. This is that thread that stretches through from time, history, culture, all that stuff.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I can't really imagine what it's like to, I mean, I guess none of us can really, because we're not living that many years. But can you imagine what it's like to be part of something that big and that important that people are going to talk about 200 years from now with your name? Like, I'm sure, you know, people 200 years from now are going to be looking at quilts we made because we label them better now, generally speaking.
Speaking of, I scolded someone that I've followed for a really long time on Instagram. I don't know her very well. I think I know her real name, but like I've just followed her literally for a year, probably like a decade. And she posted something the other day about how she stopped labeling her quilts about 10 years ago because she was just kind of like, and I was like, wait a minute. Why did you suddenly just go? But anyway, somebody apparently at one time when she was labeling her quilts, one of her quilts ended up somewhere, and that because her name was on it, and it sounded like it could have been like maybe a group quilt, but in any event, this man reaches out to her because he recognized the name and because of the area it was from. So it ended up being like this genealogical connection for her. And she's like, so yeah, I'm gonna start labeling my quilts again. So I was like, good for you. I'm so glad you said that. But like, shame, shame, shame for not labeling quilts for 10 years, because, you know, that's a problem.
I
Gotta
mean,
make more
I
quilts.
get it. It's a hassle,
It is.
but like, for those of us that are into the more the history side and what happens with things, and I got a call at the library last week because someone had found a quilt or bought a quilt somewhere. I don't remember how, but it had a tag on it from, I think it was the Iowa Quilt Study Group, like their documentation group. And was asking, they're around here, and was asking, like, what do I do? And I'm like, well, you contact them, and
Yeah.
they can tell you about it, and then they can update the database on like where things are. We should call it like the National Quilt Tracking Registry, and you can see a map of your quilt and like all the places, like how they used to do that with like dollar bills, and it would be like, look at
Yes,
this
that was it
website,
where is George? I think that
something
was
like that, and
where
you
is
could
George
see all the
Harrison. Yeah.
dots of like where your quilt has been or something like that.
That would be cool. I had a friend asked recently if she should sign her poetry. Yes. I think anything that you make with your hands or your brain should have your name on it. Just for the idea of like, we are not all going to last forever. And just to have like at least your name, like people are only 100% dead when we stop saying their names, right?
I
So
was wondering where you were gonna go with that.
if you make something and put it out in the world and it has your name on it, where people can look at this thing again that you made with your hands or your brain and they say, oh, this chick named Stephanie made this really cool quilt, or whatever, then you're not dead anymore. You're still part of the consciousness of people.
Yeah, the founding of the Duncan Sioux Church. You
Oh,
know,
you guys, I had this brilliant idea and I didn't talk about it yesterday on my stream, but I will tell you guys because I mean, we have a second. So I've working through this whole Sunbonnet thing, and I was like, the Sooniverse, right? The Sooniverse, Masters of the Sooniverse. So I'm gonna make a He-Man Sunbonnet Sue. So keep your eyes peeled for that. It'll be out soon.
Masters of the Sooniverse. Now you're gonna have to, like, you've been talking about changing your name like officially to Stephanie Cake. It's gonna have to be like Stephanie, you know, Sunbonnet Cake, you know, formerly known as Sioux Nation, like.
Yeah, the Sooniverse. I'll stop at the Sooniverse.
Are we gonna need like individual then like Sioux superheroes?
I don't know. Well, I mean, Superwoman. I mean, there's so many options for Sue now that I'm thinking about it. The sunsets on Sunbonnet Sue. Of course, you guys know that was the Kansas. What were they? The quilters. It was like the Quilters Union something or another. The Kansas City Guild or Kansas Guild, and they made that the sunsets on Sunbonnet Sue. Well, the sun's rising on Sunbonnet Sue.
Well, then you got like Sunbonnet Spider Woman.
It's
Like
got
I
to be a
think,
play on Sue. It's always got to be a play on Sue.
but but the Sunbonnet's part
Superheroes.
of the most important part.
Superheroes.
I think you should do that. I think you should. Like the quilt you just got, the Mary Schaefer quilt with like the sunbonnet babies on it. That's just the embroidery. Like, I think you need to make a small quilt like that. That's like, sunbonnet superheroes.
I
And
agree.
just, like how many are on there? Six or eight Sues?
The Mary Schaefer, there's only five.
Oh, there's only five. There you go. There's only five you have to do. Like, so instead of saying like you need to do this king size quilt of all these individual blocks of Sue superheroes,
I just need a few.
that would be really cool. That would be very cool. Show them that
Yeah,
Sue's a badass,
she is. We don't need
regardless
to
of
kill
whether.
her.
Yeah.
We don't need to let a big snake eat her.
Well, you know what? Like I find that there is a place for that Sue quilt in the grand scheme of things, but that can be like her bad day. That's like her breakup day, and then she like reemerges, a phoenix out of the flames and becomes a better version of herself. Like,
Yes, I have high hopes for Sue. So you want to go to the last one? The last paper?
let's do it.
Now, this one was really interesting to me because I know a little bit about the LDS just because I like to read and watch videos about interesting things. Um, I don't know that I've ever seen a narrative about, LDS work like this. And, obviously this is a person who, see Joyce Peden, that she is an LDS member, right?
Yeah, so just
Uh,
one word of caution. Um, Documentaries you're watching about the LDS aren't necessarily the same.
oh no, I'm not saying
Oh,
documentaries. I'm not watching I'm not talking about the documentaries.
well, I was just saying, like, they're not all DS groups
Yeah. Yeah. I
are
follow a
the
couple of I follow some mainstream and ex-Mormons and they have interesting stories. I mean, I just cultures and societies that are, like I'm not a religious person, but I'm really fascinated by religion.
Mhm.
And I mean, I know you have religious studies in your past too, probably for the same reason.
Yeah, no, I was
Um,
not raised religious at all.
but yeah, I mean, just from the perspective of, I mean, I know what I do know about the LDS church is that, like missionary work and charitable work in communities is important to them. That like I don't know what you would call it, like in terms of a mission statement or whatever. It's like part of their doctrine. So I thought this was really interesting. I had no idea that there was this kind of specific quilt related church relief going on. Um,
I didn't either for World War II.
hmm
Yeah, no,
And
I
I didn't know, like the very beginning, I always love it when a paper like blows you away within the first couple of sentences, like it's supposed to, where it
Mhm.
says, you could not give quilts away. You could not always do that. Like, oh my gosh, somebody would make you have a license and permission to give a quilt away. Like that's very interesting. And I kind of just, I mean, I'm sure it has to do with like the burden on infrastructure, I guess, but I still was like, why? Like what? Why?
I mean, I don't know the answer, but I don't think your hypothesis is
Yeah. Well, I mean, she
wrong.
mentions the postal service, and I'm
Hmm.
sure that's a big piece of it. Like you just can't
Hmm.
mail stuff. Um, yeah, and I mean, Europe was gas war torn. You can't exactly like, here, let me come over there and start a little group.
Well, I mean,
It's
not even
just,
just war torn, they were just in rubble.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So,
absolutely.
so I'm sure, like, that might be part of the problem is kind of like, if you got someone on the US side just dropping a bunch of crap at a port, but there's no plans on what happens to it after that, then actually that becomes the
Exactly.
burden. So, like, you got to
Exactly.
make
Well,
sure
and
that
and
there's
we've
something
seen
to
that
follow through.
too. Yeah, we've seen that too. Oh, Tish, so when was that? Do you mean when were you not allowed to give the quilts? So this is the third paper. This is called Donated Quilts, Warmed War-Torn Europe. And it is, I mean, the gist of it is Joyce Peden, and she had a family member that made a lot of quilts for this effort, but also she's describing the effort that these quilts were like loaded in and all of these supplies loaded like into cars and box cars and all kinds of stuff just to get things out. And there, I did not realize there were a lot of Mormons in Germany. I had no idea.
And Tish, we're dealing with World War II, so it's the mid 1940s by the end
Yeah.
of the war.
hmm
And they're
Yeah. So
sending over
47.
support to help people in the aftermath of the war.
Yeah. A lot of this, it seems like it's happening between 1945 and 1947.
Mhm. It's amazing too, again, sheer numbers um on 107 when they talk about um they had some 3,326 quilts left in the church storehouses in the fall of 1945. Individual ward relief societies allocated 6,636 more quilts
Mm-hmm.
and just under 2,000 blankets specifically for Europe from their so-called war emergency kits. Like,
Right.
I can't fathom these numbers. Even a little bit down, we talk, there's another 5,000 quilts and another 1,400
Yeah.
blankets.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I'm
And just, I mean, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, like, I'm sure I've there is mention, Tish, in here, I think, of Canada, stuff coming from Canada. Um, I feel like I mean, I've been a part of, drives and things like that for causes. So I feel like at some point I've been a part of something with these kinds of numbers, but I feel like the numbers have never been reported back.
Well,
So
so I always struggle with numbers and I'm always kind of like, all right, what does that look like? So, as an example, for those of you that saw pictures of QuiltCon and or were there, Tish, if you look at the quilt exhibit area of QuiltCon and on Instagram, there was a lot of people that posted that kind of overview,
top
like
down.
there was a platform up there and you could see down. There were 600 quilts on display.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's what you were looking at, 600 quilts. What does 600 quilts look like stacked up? I'm not exactly sure. I mean, I've been behind the scenes with QuiltCon before, and I have seen like once they start taking the quilts down and the people that are responsible for sending them back to their makers, like there's the whole conference room that gets like just piled and mounted. Um, and then and if you've ever read Patrick Souvenirs, the book about the 1933 Centennial,
Chicago
the
World.
Sears and Roebuck, yeah, the
Mhm.
Chicago World's Fair and the Centennial exhibit, um, or Century of Progress, I'm sorry. They got, I think Sears and Roebuck got like 10,000 quilts. And there's like a picture of like just these brown paper packages, like like a mountain. And so I mean, those are just two examples of like heaps and heaps of quilts. And these numbers, like, I mean, just these two particular papers, all of these numbers that have been quoted, I mean, this is like miles and miles and miles of fabric and piles and piles and piles of quilts. And I mean, can you even imagine, even if they were all like really super plain, simple, not a whole lot of effort quilts, can you imagine the hours and hours of sewing?
You know what's interesting
I
too
mean,
is there's off the top of my head, I forget their name, but there's a big name quilt dealer in England, in like London. Um, and I'd always wondered, like, man, how did a large number of American quilts get over there? And there's a joke that, like, I forget the guy's name off the top of my head, but like that he brought them all there to sell. I was reading this, I'm thinking like, wow, how much of his inventory might have come from this, like families, as they, estate sales and things of
mhm,
families that may have gotten, quote, American quilts this way. And then they're coming to his hands, later on. I mean, I don't
mhm.
know. I'm gonna have to like look up his name now. Um,
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, just outside of these stories, it's interesting how things like especially UK, Canada, and the US, how I mean, I guess there's just enough people that have family members, dispersed and like I have a sewing machine that is from the UK, but the woman I bought it from, her mother she was Scandinavian and she grew up in Canada. And she's like, I don't know how she ended up with the sewing machine from the UK because of the dates, like the date of the
mhm,
machine itself, and like the dates
mhm.
her mother was in Canada. And then of course now the woman I bought it from is in the US now. Um, but she's like, she didn't know the whole story, like the whole, you know, from beginning to end. So I was like, that's fascinating. Like I wonder how, like, something as simple as that. And I mean, a sewing machine's a big heavy thing. So talking about, moving it across the water and, you know, continent.
So the company's Antique Textiles Company, and the man's name is Christopher, and just their
Hmm.
little blurb here. They have a selection of antique quilts for sale in the UK, English and Welsh quilts, American and French quilts from the 1780s to the 1970s. So yeah,
Hmm.
I just
Interesting.
wonder, that would be quite interesting.
Yeah. It's also like, I mean, the idea of I know that there's a few people you follow that I follow too on Instagram that have, and we're not necessarily talking quilts, but just like textiles and, you know, cool stuff that we all collect or covet, you know.
Mhm.
And there's one person in particular, I think her name is her Instagram is Starched and Crumpled. And she basically like just went on a buying trip. And she's not in the US. I think I want to say she's in the UK. But she went on some kind of buying trip in Europe and has all this cool stuff. And it's like costume stuff, like clothing and you know, like buttons and trims and all that kind of stuff, lace. Um,
Haberdashery.
haberdasheries. There's a place near me that mostly does. They do some quilts and some textiles, but it's more furniture and like home furnishings. But they do the same thing. They go on these buying trips. They fill up shipping containers of stuff, and I mean that's the deal. Like you're not you're not just filling up like a trunk or a crate. That would cost a lot of money to ship. You're filling up a whole damn shipping container, and yeah, it costs a lot of money. But there's the companies that will, you know, transport that stuff. And then I think that's at least now, that's how a lot of stuff is getting like between continents because there are people like that that they know where the deals are and they find that stuff and they grab it, you know, en
It's
masse.
so funny. A friend of mine and I joke about going over to Europe on like a shopping trip, and the joke is, well, I mean, to make it worth your while, you got to fill a shipping container, but like we're going over there to buy like needlework tools. So like,
Oh, yeah.
how many,
Giant
how many,
suitcase.
yeah, like how many millions of dollars do you have to spend on needlework tools to fill up a shipping container? Oh, one can dream.
Buy all of it. Every last
Oh,
needlework
and
tool in Europe.
there's so much of it over there. Like we didn't make near
Hmm.
as much cool stuff as they did.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. So Tish, the ones that were made in Glasgow, the ones sold in Canada. Okay. So yeah, then I'm guessing sewing machines were coming then from the UK over to Canada. So that was probably like a um, manufacturing shipping, and
Hmm.
then it's easy to get to the US from Canada. You just don't
Hmm.
have to get on a boat.
Hmm. 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 Well, as we kind of wind down here, because I mean, I feel like I've said the things that I wanted to say. Have you said the things
Yeah,
that you wanted
yeah.
to say?
I think I did too. Yeah, these were an interesting group of papers. I like ordinarily when you're talking about like, you know, Civil War quilts or just any kind of war of stuff, I'm just like, I'm sure it's interesting, but this was really interesting.
It's
Wait a
just
minute. Tish, what? Um, in April. All right.
I
Now
do.
how big is your suitcase? And will Jill and
And
or
are
I'll fit
you
in it.
willing to like do live streaming, like video calls while you're there? Because
Oh
it
my
is there
gosh.
are there any like
Poor
preview
DePhil.
photos
Oh.
anywhere?
So what is Pour Lamar de is that the for the love of what is Phil? For the love of thread?
Sure.
I can only guess at French. But I think yeah, the love of yeah, Phil, I think that's Phil is like something like thread, right?
Maybe. Unless are you thinking of like Aurifil?
No, I'm just saying like I mean I have some French threads and stuff and I feel like, you know, fil de soie
Oh
is
no,
like
you were right. It's
silk
thread.
thread. It is thread. Okay. I know
What
something. I know the French
so
word for thread.
Tish, what is that show? I mean, I can look it up obviously, but like is that like a generalized needlework show? Is it mostly quilts? Is it like lots of other handwork?
We're gonna have to look at that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We could plan for next year.
Yeah, that sounds very, I'm really bummed because there is a quilting tour company, World Quilts Travel. And they had a history related tour that was in England that did visit this antique textile company. You spent time at the Victoria and Albert Museum. You spent time at an original place that made quilts and embroidery. Thanks, Tish. We'll look in that. You made a trip to an old um needle a needle manufacturer. I think there was also a tour of a place that made like pins, you know, like 1700s pins, something like that. All kinds of just cool history related stuff.
Yeah, I love stuff like
And
that.
they last offered it, I want to say in like 2021, 2 maybe. And I've been watching to see if it was offered again, and I finally emailed them after watching like 2 cycles go by where they didn't offer it. And the woman that runs it was like, I don't think we're ever going to offer that again because it's getting so much harder to
Oh,
schedule the behind the scenes things in institutions. And I
that's a
was like,
bummer.
wow, that stinks. Because I wanted to do
Yeah.
so bad. I
Yeah,
mean,
that's a bummer. I mean, that kind of stuff is so fascinating, so cool.
mhm.
Ah, Tish, we're so jealous. So jealous.
Yeah.
I can't wait to hear about your trip.
Yeah, like take lots of pictures and we'll like
Yes, please.
stream about it
Yeah,
if you want. Because I want
yeah,
to hear
for
about
sure.
that. Um, so just to remind, next week, we're doing the section on textiles and tools, which Steph is very excited about. Um,
But you
and
should be too.
of course I am, but I mean, like you were especially excited. And then again, our next book is Antique American Needlework Tools by Dawn Cook Ronnigen. She has an Etsy store. She self-publishes. Please, I encourage you to buy the book from her store. It's autographed, and it helps support her to publish more books. And she does have another really cool book on there about sewing rolls. Um, that is also I also encourage you to get because it's really cool.
I got it for my birthday. It's just visually stunning.
Actually, yeah, she does really good photography of tools.
Yeah, yeah.
That's for sure. Um, and then, Steph has her Twitch that you
My
need to be
Twitch?
watching twice a
Yes,
week.
Mondays. Yes, Mondays and Thursdays, 2 p.m. Eastern. I've got lots of, well, I mean, just to plug all the things that I like verbal diarrhea yesterday that you and I have been talking about and doing. I mean, we've got tons and tons of stuff that's going to show up here as well as over on my stream. So yeah, keep your eyes peeled.
And then just to put it out there for people to think about, Steph and I have been talking about doing a stream that discusses some of the ins and outs for things for AQSG. So things like what are study centers, what do they do, what's it like, things about publishing papers, things like that that people seem to be confused about. So if anybody's got questions, Steph has given a study center now 3 times, so in person and online, so she definitely can tell you the ins and outs of things. Because we definitely want to be encouraging more people to do stuff like that. And they're super fun. Not only did Steph give one, but like in person and online, we've gone to many of them
Yeah,
and have
yeah,
talked with other people.
yeah.
And
So such good info. Such good
and
info.
we've gotten more background info from the board, people on the board and things of kind of what things can be included and what it can actually look like, that Steph and I were both surprised that we didn't,
Hmm.
things we didn't realize. So lots of things are open for discussion. So like please do tell us
Yeah. And
what
just a
questions.
heads up to, I guess, to kind of bounce off of what Jill's saying about AQSG. I mean, we're members, we're really involved right now, and we talk about them all the time. There's opportunities to, like you could produce a study center, which is, I mean, it's a little bit different than just a lecture. It's kind of an open-ended like sort of thing. It's actually a little bit easier than a lecture now that I think about it, because you don't have to have like things like super buttoned up. It's a study center. It's like the study. You're in the middle of the study. Um, but where was I going with that? Oh dear God, this COVID brain is gonna kill me.
To build off of what I was saying, because we're both involved and we're both
Yes.
members.
I don't even remember now. I have
Thank
to
you.
stop saying I have to stop saying things and elaborating. I have to like go straight into it because I like my brain is like,
Were you going to talk about
oh, that you don't
hands-on?
have to be a member.
Oh.
That was what I was trying to say. You don't have to be a member.
Mhm.
Um, that was something that I didn't quite realize until pretty recently that if you wanted to give a study center, you wanted to pitch something to AQSG and like go to a seminar and give, your study center, you don't have to be a member to do that. So yeah, that's something that to think about.
That definitely makes sense for people that maybe have something that's related, but
Hmm.
but you like bed rugs. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
like
And,
if
oh, and
someone's
by
got a
the
thing about bed
way,
rugs.
we got off onto the tangent of the bed rugs last week. If you guys haven't had a chance to look at the stuff that I posted, there was a Tish had found a blog post about the Colonial Williamsburg bed rugs, and then our friend Barb, I mean, she's got this like encyclopedic knowledge of like some of the stuff that's out there. Um, Tara Miller, we're friends with her, and Lynn Bassett, who's one of the Six Snow Dolls, they had together done a whole thing on bed rugs. And is it, oh gosh, is it in Vermont? Was it in Vermont? I can't remember which
I
museum it
didn't look
was.
I thought it wasn't Sturbridge.
Maybe it was Sturbridge.
I was gonna say
Well, I'm
Lynn Bassett
terrible.
used to be like the curator at Sturbridge.
Yeah, this was within the past year or two that she did it. But anyway, it was an amazing show that was at, one of these organizations, one of these museums, and Lynn walked Tara through the whole thing, and it's a great video. I learned a lot. I
I
saw
haven't
some
watched it
beautiful
yet.
things. So yes, 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 please go to the Quilt Nerding Facebook and check out those links because good stuff. And not, I mean, and not just bed rugs. There was other cool stuff in that video. So
I mean, the bed rugs are cool too, though. Like I
yeah,
said, I
yeah.
have a feeling we're gonna end up having to like read something about bed rugs now.
And you know what? Not to keep because we are definitely over what we usually do. But what I was going to say, there, did you catch the note about? I mean, technically, there was a bed rug in these papers tonight where they were talking about the size of a hospital cot and how like a quilt could be cut into thirds for 3 hospital cots. There was a mention of a rug.
Oh,
Bind
I
your
didn't catch
rugs.
that. See, look, you got them
Hmm.
on the brain.
And the thing is, I'm like, they're really pretty. I'm not that interested in them, but I kind of am obsessed.
I mean, it's okay to like go on these like random little tangents into topics like here and
Hmm.
there,
Well,
but
exactly. And that's why I think it's so fun to find somebody else that's done, that has fallen down that rabbit hole because they can give you like this nice, concise, like paper or study center or tour or whatever it is. And then you're like, I'm
and
such a dork now. I've learned all this and look at me.
and then by the time they're done, you're like, okay, that's enough. Yeah.
Exactly.
You're like, I don't want to go
Exactly.
any further. That is sufficed.
Yeah.
I am
I have
done.
checked
Thank you.
bed rugs off of my bucket list.
I feel like I feel like now I need to check bed rugs. I'm really actually bummed there was an exhibit in Connecticut, not, I don't know, a year or two ago maybe, that I didn't go to. And I wonder if maybe I'm pretty sure Lynn Bassett did that exhibit. I wonder if maybe
Yeah,
that
I
and the
didn't
Tara
realize
thing
like
were
she's a bed
related.
rug person. Like Lynn Bassett, she's petticoats, which I knew. She's
Mhm.
done like this whole amazing research on these specific beautiful quilted petticoats. But then also she's a bed rug person, like a bed rug scholar. But yeah, so knowledgeable, and she just, I mean, the way she talked about it answered a lot of my questions that I had last week. So
Mhm.
yeah.
All right, I'm gonna have to
All
like
right.
I need to watch it.
Yeah. Do.
Speaking of just like random things that Steph and I talk about to watch, there are exciting things that are gonna come in April. Steph and I have plans.
I did tease it yesterday.
Did
So
you tease some things? Okay,
I
yeah.
did. Yeah.
So we are going, I mean at this point, we're just winging it in Pennsylvania because I feel like our really niche plans have just kind of mellowed now, and that's totally fine. Um, and her mom is coming,
We're
which
dragging my mother along.
I don't think we're dragging anyone. I'm pretty sure she was like, I'm going.
All
Uh,
right. So she was willingly invited herself.
so we have rented a house, and so we'll definitely like she can make her debut
She,
online.
she technically has been on my stream
Has she?
before, but
Yeah.
like, yeah, it was like her voice because when I was doing streams from her house,
Oh no, we
she
can do
was in the
better than
background.
that. Just her voice. Um, so that's happening. We are attending like kind of an area quilt show, the Lancaster Lebanon. I don't know excuse me, anyone else is around the area that's going to be there that like wants to like say hello. But we are attending that so we can get some pictures of that. Um, we we are going to be doing sourcing while we're out there. Not just shop sourcing, but we have a date with Barbara Garrett, who, if Barbara, if you're here, love you, girl. We have a date with her. We're gonna spend time with her. We love spending time with her. And we're gonna be able to do some quilt turning with her. That will be,
That'd
it
be
won't be
exciting.
live, it'll be filmed, but then
Mhm.
we'll be here live with you looking at it and can.
Yeah, Barb has agreed to sort of be our guinea pig to try filming a quilt turning.
Mhm.
So, yeah,
And then Steph and I are planning, if it all works out, to do some experimental archaeology. We have our plan to do our feed sacks,
the
removing,
flower sack print. Yes, I have
yeah.
my shopping list: lard, kerosene.
Luckily, I've stayed at this house before, and it does have a garage so that we won't look like these.
Oh,
It's a condo
yeah.
place, so we won't look
Shh,
like these
don't let
weirdos.
these people know what we're doing at their house.
Yeah, just in weird buckets, like, and stuff. So there will be really exciting things to look forward to coming in April.
For sure.
But otherwise, we'll leave on that exciting note. What do you say?
I see. That's a very exciting note. I'm truly excited for what we're doing. So it's gonna be fun.
All right, everybody. Thanks so much
Hi
for
guys.
joining us.
Yeah. See you next week or on Thursday.
Everybody go watch Steph's Twitch. Like, I command you. I command you. Tish, they're out there. You'll find them. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Bye.